Other than that little misunderstanding, I don't see a reason we would. Then the world turned cold as I heard that voice from the past coming through the front door as she knocked rapidly on the door. I turned to go put that woman in her place for ruining this day, only to see my daughter surging from her seat. "I'll handle it, Dad. If Mom knows you're here, she won't leave," Amber said, marching towards the front door. "What have you been teaching my daughter?" I asked, looking at my wife, who had a coy grin on her lips. It wasn't lost on me that my mother was smiling into her glass. "This and that," Catalina said vaguely. "That's so?" Arching an eyebrow when Catalina sat all proper in her chair. "You don't have to worry about that woman holding sway over her any longer." Catalina took her own sip of her drink. "Please, tell me you didn't teach her how to be as feisty as you are?" I uttered, feigning a sigh as I pinched my nose. That's not nice, Nat," Catalina grumbled, puffing out her cheeks when she caught on that I was only messing with her. "I thought you would be happy." "I am. It's good you helped her to get her confidence back. At least I know she has two mother figures looking out for her," I said, praising my wife and mother, seeing my wife blushing hard at that. "Well, she's my daughter now, and women in this family are strong-willed," Catalina said, regaining her composure. "Don't I know it?" I said under my breath as I carried George's and Meredith's drinks out to them. "What was that?" Catalina's voice trailed after me. "Nothing, honey," I called back. "Better be nothing." I knew she only said it in jest. "Poppy, who is that woman? She doesn't seem like a happy person," Alondra asked, peering out the window through the crack of the curtains. "No one you need to worry about." "Now what have I told you about spying on other people's conversations?" I asked in a fatherly voice as I handed the two of them their drinks. "But David is watching. Why can't I?" Alondra pouted. "Because David isn't watching to spy on them. He's watching to ensure Amber will be all right," I stated, seeing David nodding along. "Is she a bad person?" Alondra asked innocently, unaware that the stranger was my ex-wife. "I think she is," I said, noting how David's parents were staying out of it. "But what did she do?" Alondra asked with the curiosity of a 5-year-old. "Leave it alone, Alondra," I said. She must have noted the look in my eyes, for she didn't say another word about that woman again. "God, she pisses me off sometimes," Amber hissed as she stormed back into the house and buried herself in David's arms. "Sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to curse with Alondra in the room." "I'm sorry, Papa, George, Meredith, that you had to be here for that," she said, looking around the room when I peered back at her. "Amber, are you all right?" I asked, knowing her mother was a touchy subject. "I will be," Amber sighed, hugging David tight. "Young man, are you trying to take liberties with my daughter?" I asked in a teasing light as they kissed, noting how David's parents were trying not to laugh. "I am," David said with a smile on his face. "Good. Dad?" Amber gasped. "What? This is 2021. No sense in being stuck in the 1900s. Live a little," I said, embarrassing the hell out of my daughter. After all, isn't that what parents do when their kids are in love? Although, I do wonder if his thoughts are pure enough for my girl, I mused, tapping my chin, watching my daughter's face go through various shades of red as I continued my teasing. "I assure you, Nathan, they are not." I chuckled when Amber slapped his chest, telling him not to play along with my antics. Dinner was a hoot as we all gathered around the table to have the leftovers from lunch. Laughter and stories abounded as we all swapped one story for another, with Alondra chiming in telling them all about our trip to the beach and the zoo. While Catalina led on that, we were thinking of taking a trip to Spain sometime next year, after the wedding, of course. Although it didn't seem that Amber was surprised by the news. After all, she and Catalina had become thick as thieves over the months. Then we said our goodbyes to David's parents, then to Amber and David, promising to spend that Friday together before we flew back to Charlotte on Saturday. When the time came to leave, there were a lot of hugs to go around, knowing we wouldn't be seeing each other till March unless they flew in to see us on Christmas, which I hoped they would, but knew Amber wouldn't not if she didn't want to deal with my ex-wife for being left out. Personally, I say she could rot in hell, but Amber is the one that has to live in that town with her. So I didn't want to rock the boat and leave her to deal with the mess. The next 21 days were brutal on me as I was on edge to see my son. Carson was planning on flying in on the 19th, and leaving on the 26th so he could save the rest of his leave for Amber's wedding. Not that I cared. I would have my boy with me for 6 whole days. That was 6 days more than I have had with him in 7 years due to my stubbornness. I know Catalina got a little annoyed with me. Still, she didn't say anything, given she knew I was on pins and needles as I, along with Catalina and Alondra, waited for Carson's plane to arrive. Carson, Carson, Carson. Alondra shouted in joy at the sight of her half-brother as she bounced on her feet beside her mother, waving her hand wildly as we waited for my son to make his way through the throngs of bodies. "Go on, amor," Catalina whispered, giving me that loving smile of hers as she nudged my arm. Carson's bag dropped to the ground as his pace quickened. We crushed each other in a very tight hug as I held my boy in my arms like I had done long before his mother went insane. "Look at you," I said. Pride filled my eyes as I held my son's face in my hands. "You've grown so much." I tried not to tear up, I tried. But this was my boy. Wouldn't you? "Come on, Dad. Don't embarrass me in front of Mom." Even if my son was a grown man now, I could still see that little boy I raised. Although, I did wonder when my kids started to call Catalina their mother. Not that I was opposed to it, it was just a pondering that probably would go unanswered. "I hope your flight was uneventful, Carson," Catalina said when she joined my side, getting her own hug in from my son. "It was. Thank you for everything." I arched an eyebrow when I heard my son whisper that to Catalina. I wondered just what my son meant when he said that. "It's what family is for," Catalina said, rubbing his back. "I'm always going to be here for you too, so don't you hesitate to call." I noticed how my son was hugging her tighter when she said that. I looked down when Alondra tugged on his pants when she too wanted her own hug as she held out her arms to him. "Hello, lil sis," Carson greeted as he squatted down and hugged his sister tightly to him. I noted the wow when Alondra patted Carson's right bicep when he flexed his muscle for her. I still think I got my son beat. I might be old, but not so old that my son can beat his old man. "Carson, what are your plans when you get out of the Army?" I asked as we walked back to my car. "Thinking of becoming an engineer." I heard the matter-of-fact tone in his voice when he answered me. "Oh, is that what you are in the Army?" I asked, peering over at him as he walked beside Catalina. "No, I'm just a grunt," Carson said, shaking his head. "You looking at schools?" "I got a few in mind." I saw his nod. "Maybe we can help you narrow them down," Catalina said in that loving tone, which I nodded along. "I have one in mind, but I don't know if you'll go for it." I noted how my son slyly eyed me. "Oh, and where would that be?" I asked as I popped the trunk of my car. "Duke." I stopped in my tracks as that name left my son's lips. "What did you say?" I uttered, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know it's not close, but it's closer than California," and I thought, maybe you'd be all right with me coming. I heard my son's huff as I hugged him abruptly. "Of course, son. You can come home anytime you want. You know that," I said with a trembling voice. "I can't promise you'll keep that figure with the way Catalina cooks." Feeling my wife playfully slapping my arm. Yet I knew from that smile she was thrilled as well. "You sure?" "I don't want to." "Carson, you're always welcome in our home." "It's yours and Amber's home too," Catalina cut in with that warm, motherly voice of hers as she lightly touched my son's right arm. "Yeah, my brother is coming home." Alondra squealed as she did a little dance. "I'm so glad you two said that." I arched an eyebrow when I noted the stress leaving his shoulders. I already got accepted into it for the start of fall semester there next year. I could only laugh, laying my arm along his shoulders and pulling Carson into me, seeing that blushing face of his as I bestowed my fatherly pride on him. "Well then, let's get you home. Amber and David are so going to be mad they lost the guest bedroom." I chuckled as I stowed my son's bag in the trunk of my car. "Here," I said, holding out a beer for my son as he leaned on the railing of my balcony, looking out upon the city. "You're old enough. Don't give me that look," I uttered when my son looked at me and the beer in my hand. "Just never thought I would be able to do this with you," Carson spoke, taking the bottle from my hand. "I didn't either," I admitted. "Glad I was proven wrong." "Catalina seems to love you a lot," Carson muttered offhandedly. "As do I." Turning to wave at her as she puttered around in the condo, while Alondra colored in her coloring book at the coffee table. "Dad, about that day?" Carson's words stilled in his throat as I placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay," Amber told me. "Your mother should have never put you two in that kind of situation. That isn't how a parent should act. I just never knew she would sink that low to wrangle the two of you into her schemes to keep me as an unknowing cuck. So let's not worry about the past and focus on the here and now, okay?" "I can get behind that," Carson said with a warm smile as he tapped the neck of his beer bottle against mine. "So, Dad, you two planning on having any more kids?" I nearly spit out my beer when my son asked me that. "Don't you do that," I chided, wagging my finger at my son, who was just smiling like a fool. "Have you been talking to Catalina?" To this, my son just nodded. "We're going to try after your sister's wedding. But I don't know, Carson. By the time Alondra is in high school, I'm going to be in my 60s. So, does that matter if you are or aren't?" My son did make an excellent point. "And you'll be all right with another brother or sister?" I asked, leaning on the railing. "Yeah, our family might have imploded, but you were always a good dad. I can't say the same about Mom." I rubbed my son's back as he sighed. "What your mother did is solely on her, and no one else. So don't trouble yourself over it," I said before taking the last sip of my beer. "Come on, lunch should be ready," I spoke, taking my son's empty beer bottle from him. "What we having?" "Carnitas, you'll love them, I promise," I said with a warm smile as I led my son back into the condo. "Oh, this is good." I watched as my son groaned in enjoyment as he took his first bite of his carnitas. "What's in this?" I saw how he looked to my wife like a child seeking his mother's knowledge. "Pork, just pork, a little seasoning, but pork mostly," Catalina answered with that smile of hers. "Please, if you're still hungry, there is still plenty more for you to enjoy. Although, if you are, I'd get to it before your father does." I shot my wife a glance when she winked at my son, who sat beside Alondra, who blew me a kiss. I knew she was so overjoyed that my two adult children enjoyed her cooking. I watched how Alondra told Carson how to fold it so that the filling wouldn't fall out when he took a bite, noting the wide smile on Alondra's lips when Carson asked if he had done it right. I took heart to know that my children were getting along with one another despite their age differences. I knew Alondra got lonely sometimes with being the only child in the house. It warmed my heart to know that she could now speak with her siblings when that happened. "Son," I warned when he reached for the hot sauce. "Relax, I can handle it. Mom's got me hooked on it." I noted how Catalina's face was burning when my son smiled at her. "What have you done to my son?" I asked in a teasing voice. "Expanded his palate. Don't blame him because he has excellent tastes," Catalina said, turning her nose up at me. "I think we need to have a discussion about this later in the dormitorio," I said in a sinful tone. "Oh, is that so?" Catalina replied with a purr. "Oh yes, a nice azotina is in order," I said low so Alondra wouldn't hear me, noting how my wife's nostrils flared, how her breathing quickened, to the way that blush colored her cheeks as the flames of her hunger burned in her eyes. "I look forward to it," Catalina said in this sexy tone before taking a bite of her rice. It wasn't lost on me on how Carson was looking at the two of us during it as he chewed his bite, before that smile appeared on his lips and went back to his meal. When Christmas came, as all children are on that day, Alondra was there at my bedside at far too damn early in the morning on my day off with that look on her face that it was time to open presents. I wonder if children have this network for such events so they could freak the ever-loving shit out of them when their parents were still half asleep. "Thanks, Mom," Carson yawned as he took his cup of Java from Catalina. What can I say? Catalina wore the mantle well, nor was I ever going to stop my kids from calling her that. After what Amber had told me, I figured they needed someone that actually treated them like their child. After breakfast, we all gathered around the living room. Alondra raced around giving out presents to each of us and setting her pile off to the side. I got my son a very expensive watch with a time zone setting set to the East Coast while the main face was on Pacific time. However, the gift I gave my wife, other than the pearl earrings and necklace, not the kind you're thinking of, but I do give her those as well, but that's neither here nor there. What truly had my wife perplexed on that Wednesday morning was the set of keys she pulled out of a velvet box I had placed them into. Nat Catalina gave me that look as to explain, "Well, you've always wanted a large family, You never said it, but a husband knows. As I spoke, I saw her eyes widening. And well, this condo isn't large enough to house our family and the future members to come, I stated, placing my hand on her stomach as she looked down at it. I know my fretting about this entire month got on your nerves about Carson coming in, but that was also to keep you unaware of what I was doing as I was in talks. You do have a way of sniffing out things. I spoke, a smile touching my lips, as her mind raced to comprehend what I was saying. You bought us a house, Catalina shouted, leaping up from her seat. I did. I knew the bank had some foreclosed houses just sitting around, and I took a look through them until I got a one big enough for our needs. The bank and I worked out an agreement to take the payment out of my checks, so we don't need to worry about a mortgage. We can move in after the first of the month, I said, watching how her emotions were all over the place before she squealed in joy and leaped into my arms. You're going to love the place, Mom, Carson said, smiling at the two of us. You already knew I couldn't keep my smile from showing as Carson bowed his head in embarrassment. I did. Dad took me to it on Monday to see if I'd like staying there when I came home on the weekends. I bit my lip at how small Carson's voice was when he said that. My hand moved along my wife's back as she rose from her spot and walked over to Carson, keeping my curious look to myself when Carson had this look in his eye. A look that Amber had on Thanksgiving when she looked at Catalina, that reminded me when he would look at his mother when he was a small boy as Catalina took his face in her hands. Did you like it? Good, Catalina cooed after Carson nodded as she hugged him. We want you to come home as much as you want, Carson. Our home will always have a place for you and Amber in it. Never forget that. Taking a dry swallow when those brown eyes of hers cut to me. Now you are going to show me this house you bought us. Now, where are we going? Catalina asked me as I started up my car. Belmont, I answered, backing out of my parking space at the condo complex, which I was going to rent out since we own it outright. I know the traffic would be bad going in the mornings. Still, really, that condo already felt small when Amber and David came to visit, and I wanted all my children to be able to come home and know they would have a place for them to stay. It took about 30 minutes to reach Belmont due to the light traffic on I-85 and another 10 to reach the old district where the house was located. I heard my wife and daughter gasp as I pulled up the concrete driveway and into the attached garage to the two-story, red brick house. Black fixed shutters lined the windows, while old, the house had been brought up to code so there wouldn't be any cold drafts leaking in. How big is this place? Catalina asked as she got out of the car as the garage door came down, bundling herself deeper into her coat. 4 bedrooms in the main part of the house, with 3 baths and an apartment over the garage. I was thinking of letting Carson stay there so when he comes to visit us, he doesn't have to worry about waking us if he arrives late, I said, pointing at the side door and the stairs that lead up to it. Seeing my wife nodding along. You wouldn't mind that, Carson? Catalina asked, peering at him as my son stood at her side. No, I think it's a good idea. I'll try not to bring too many girls home, Carson spoke, causing me to snort in amusement, leading them into the house proper and unzipping my own coat given how the heat was on. Watching my wife move around the large kitchen, noting how, which I could only assume, she imagined how it would look when we got the appliances in. Smiling as my daughter mimicked her mother as Alondra went about examining the bottom cabinets like Catalina was doing with the overhead ones. Watching Alondra running around the empty living room, laughing like mad at all the space. I showed my wife the only bedroom and bath on the ground floor, which I told her I thought it would be a good place for Amber and David whenever they visited us again. That way, they would have their privacy to do what couples do. Seeing her nod of agreement. You know we're going to have to christen this place, Catalina whispered lustfully into my ear as she snuggled up to me. Oh, I'm so waiting for that day, I replied. Hell, wouldn't you be? Now show me the rest, Catalina purred. That impish smile of hers was on her lips when she noted how I adjusted myself. What can I say? My wife has that effect on me. Alondra? I called out as me, and my wife neared the stairs. Yes, Poppy? Alondra's voice filled the house as she raced towards us while she was playing with Carson. Let's go see your new bedroom, I said with a smile as Alondra nodded very vigorously, wincing as my daughter squealed in laughter as she spun around her room that sat on the west wing of the house down the hall from the master bedroom. showing the room I thought could be the baby's room if we have another while Alondra explored her new accommodations, kissing the top of my wife's head as she rested her head on my chest. I knew she was picturing the new bundle of joy as she stared into it. "It's perfect, honey," Catalina sighed in happiness. "Now what I really want to know is, what does the master bedroom look like?" She spoke with this coy grin on her lips as those libidinous brown eyes gazed up at me. "Thought you would never ask," I retorted, matching her smile. "Look at all this closet space." Catalina squealed before dashing into the master bath. "Oh, my God. It has a jacuzzi tub." I noticed how she was already sitting in it when I walked in, noticing how the lights of the bathroom that ran along the black marble that surrounded the roundish tub meant for two people that sat on a raised platform. The standing shower sat off in a corner with the toilet facing it, while the dual sinks lined the wall next to the tub. "Why, Mr. Hal, I do believe you're trying to seduce me. You know I'm a married woman, right?" Catalina cooed at me while batting her eyelashes. "Such a shame a beautiful woman like you needs to be wined and dined, and maybe some nighttime activities in that tub," I said, playing along, wiggling my eyebrows. "I don't know. Do you think you can handle this hot, sexy Latino woman?" Catalina purred, giving me that look I knew all too well. The same look that always makes me horny, and she knew it too. "Oh, most definitely," I said with firm determination, watching how those eyes of hers flared in hunger and how she bit her lip while I teased her. "That's so, Mr. Hal." My heart raced. "Are you telling me you're going to take me here in this tub over and over again, making me howl in bliss as you take me as your woman?" My head bobbed like mad as her hand ran along her firm backside. "Good, you better. You shouldn't leave your woman wanting for her man's touch," Catalina purred as her tongue flicked against her teeth. "I'd never do that. That's just a crime against nature," I uttered truthfully, watching her smile widen at the events to come in our future. "You dirty old man, getting me all hot and bothered like this," Catalina cooed, posing herself in the tub as one hand ruffled her hair. "I'll make sure to take full responsibility for my transgressions," I said in a sinful tone. "You best, or you won't be getting any of this for a while." "Honey, does the water work?" I noted how she quickly got out of the tub. "Yeah. Why? Oh, one or two?" "One," Catalina uttered, doing this little dance, pulling out some of the tissues I keep in my coat for when Alondra had a runny nose on cold days like today, handing them to my wife before shutting the bathroom door behind me. Alondra and I strode down the stairs hand in hand, arching an eyebrow at how red my son's face was. "Something wrong, son?" I asked once we got down to the ground floor. "It's nothing, don't worry about it," Carson muttered, unable to look me in the eye. "I kind of overheard you and Catalina talking. I didn't mean to. I was just coming to see how she liked the place." I simply just chuckled at my son's plight. "It's okay, son. No shame in that," I said lightly, patting his shoulder as we both stared out the living room window at the neighborhood that would soon be our new home. "Carson, show me this apartment of yours," Catalina said as she gracefully sauntered down the stairs. "Sure, Mom." I noted the happiness in his eyes when he said that. "I approve," Catalina mused with a nod as she peered around the open floor space. I noted how Alondra darted into the small bathroom that sat in the far right corner that the equally small kitchenette was butted up against. "We'll go shopping for you when you move here." I watched how my wife gently rubbed my son's back as he nodded along. I noted how Catalina pulled out her phone as it chirped. "Honey, if we don't leave, you know my parents are going to be upset if we miss Christmas lunch," Catalina stated, peering over at me. "Then we best get moving," I nodded. "You sure you are coming too, Carson? You're a part of our family now. Get used to it," Catalina said lightly, patting his cheek before slipping her arm around mine as we headed towards the stairs. The moment we arrived at her parents' place, we were greeted very warmly. However, Carson was showered in hugs and very pleasant greetings all around. I noted how Catalina's uncle, who was going deaf, took a shining to my son given he too was a former serviceman. He joined the Marines during the Desert Storm days. I had no earthly idea what they were talking about when they began speaking in military jargon. Nodding to my son as he was led off into the crowd by the firm hand of Catalina's uncle while my wife, and I went off to greet her relatives while Alondra zoomed off to play with her cousins. I was chatting away with Hector and one of Catalina's cousins as I slyly noted how she would glance at me while she softly spoke to her mother and sisters before the three of them squealed in joy. I saw the approving smirk on my sister's-in-law lips when she gazed at me.
Amigo,
Roberto exclaimed, bringing me into a warm hug. How's it going? I asked, patting my brother-in-law's back. Doing good. I can't complain. How's having your son home? I noted the smirk on his lips when he asked me that. Like everyone there, they all thought I was foolish and stubborn in how I acted for the past 7 years. I couldn't say they weren't wrong on that matter. Good. Glad he's getting out of the army soon, I admitted, seeing Hector nodding in understanding. Oh, what are his plans once he does? Roberto asked in a sincere tone. He's going to college, I said in that proud fatherly tone. Where? Hector asked, joining the conversation. Duke, I answered with a smile on my face. Will he be coming home? I hope so, I nodded to Roberto. My eyes glanced to the left of Hector, seeing my son trying to get my attention. Excusing myself, I eased around my family members and headed off towards my son. I looked down at how my son took hold of my arm and dragged me off without an explanation. Dad, who is that? Carson asked. I heard the keen interest in his voice as he pointed out the window. That's Maria. I thought it was Maria until I noted the small star tattoo on her left wrist when she brought her hand up to her face and the sleeve of her sweater slid down her arm as she talked to one of her many cousins. In my defense, they were identical twins. Maria was married. Rosa was not. Sorry, my mistake, that's Rosa. Why? I asked, seeing the confused look on his face. Maria is Rosa's twin sister, I supplied, watching how Carson mouthed, Oh, Dad, what does? I kept my amusement from my face after it took Carson a while to enunciate what Rosa had said that he happened to overhear. I have to say I was a little flattered that a 20-year-old thought this old man was handsome when she stated that my son was just as handsome as I was, or that's what I took from it. Tell me, son, why are you trying to speak Spanish? I asked, knowing Catalina's family didn't take too kindly to anyone knowingly belittling their language. So I can talk to Mom and Alondra. At this, I couldn't help but feel my smile lifting the corners of my lips. Who's been helping you? I inquired. Carson was too good for a beginner to know how to roll his Rs like he had done, so I knew he had to have someone helping him like I did. However, like me, he was struggling with it as well, as I did when I first started to learn. A buddy in my unit, once I told him why I wanted to learn, he was more than happy to help, Carson said in this bashful tone. Carson, there's nothing to be ashamed of in wanting to learn Spanish. Turning as I saw my wife through the doorway, our eyes met. I watched that smile lifting her lips. I learned because I loved that woman, nodding in Catalina's direction. The moment she walked into my office and told me to pull whatever had crawled up my bum out of it. I grinned like mad when Carson belted out a laugh. But how do I talk to her? I don't want to sound like an idiot, you know? Carson sighed, turning his attention back out the window. Dad? His head snapped towards me when I motioned for Rosa to come to talk to me. Relax, son. I'm just lending a hand, I mused. I was so loving that look on my son's face. Who says being a parent isn't fun? Just think of all the embarrassing moments you can put your child into. Like right at that second.
Sí, Nathan, querías verme.
Rosa spoke once she had appeared in the doorway. Would you mind speaking in English while my son is just now learning? It would be rude to continue this conversation with him, not understanding a word of it, I stated. I noted how Rosa's eyes glanced over to Carson, and a soft smile appeared on her lips. Yes, of course, Nathan. What shall we talk about? I noted how she immediately caught on to why she was there. I knew if she wasn't interested, then she wouldn't have stayed or spoken in English, given how it's been banned from the gatherings unless my children were in town. Hola, Carson spoke, stepping forward and holding out his hand. I would like to say more in Spanish, but, well, I'd rather not mangle it and have you thinking I'm an idiot. I arched an eyebrow at my son's opening remark, not something I would have gone with. Nonetheless, it appeared to be working. Hola, Carson. Your father has spoken a great deal about you, Rosa replied, and that was my cue to skedaddle. What's going on in there? Catalina asked the moment I reached her side. Oh, you know, two kids from different worlds, finding each other in the darkness of night. I mused with a broad grin on my lips. I hope they get along. Rosa needs a good man, Catalina said, wrapping her arm around me as we listened to how her sister's trip turned out when she went home to Mexico for vacation. The moment it was time to head home, I went searching for my son only to stumble into what appeared to me as a rather steamy makeout session. Have him home before midnight, I teased before either of them could say a word when only surprise filled their faces at being intruded upon. Rosa nodded as her face heated, knowing what I was saying and knowing I meant it, shaking my head, chuckling to myself as I walked down the hall. Who knew my son could move that fast? Where's Carson? Catalina asked, looking behind me for my son.
Él está siendo Romeo para su Julieta.
I whispered in Spanish into her ear. Oh, was her only response as her eyes lit up at the news. She'll bring him home, I said, leading my wife and daughter out the door after waving our goodbyes to them. It was 11 on the dot when a soft knock came on my condo door. As I opened it, there stood my son, the grinning fool, shaking my head when he uttered, "Best Christmas ever. You know, if you cheat on her, you best stay on the West Coast," I stated as my son walked towards the bedroom. A wicked smile formed on my lips as that stopped my son in his tracks. Rosa will kill ya. No lie. To this, my wife nodded along, who had stayed up with me to wait for my son to return. You're joking, right? Carson stammered. Oh, no. Rosa has a worse temper than Catalina does. Well, you do, I said, looking over at her when she pouted out a hey. And Rosa doesn't like cheaters. Her father did so on their mother and ran off with the woman. So if you think this has any chance of going anywhere, you best keep that in your pants, I spoke, giving my son my fatherly advice. I understand, Dad. Thanks for the heads up. I'm not going to be like Mom, Carson said with firm determination. I was a little proud when I saw the truth in my son's eyes. Thanks for taking me along. Your family is wonderful, Mom. I'm going to turn in. Night, Dad, Mom. Night, Carson. I'm glad you had fun today, Catalina said, getting up from her seat. Night, son, I spoke, watching my son heading off to his room, knowing tomorrow would be the last time I'd see my son till March. Come, amor, let's head to bed, Catalina cooed as she snuggled up against me. Hey, like I ever was going to turn down the chance to go to bed with that woman. If I did, that means I've been replaced by a pod person because no sane man would do that. I love you, Dad, Carson said as we hugged as we stood in the airport. Love you too, son. You take care of yourself, you hear? I responded as I lightly patted his back. Of course, because I got to watch out for my lil sis. Them boys will be coming out of the woodwork soon. I noted how my daughter blushed when my son smiled down at her.
No es un adiós, solo hasta luego, Alondra.
I saw how my wife smiled when Carson spoke those words as he hugged his sister goodbye. You promise to be safe? Alondra asked with a trembling voice. Promise, Carson nodded. You watch out for Dad. You hear? A loving smile formed on my lips as my daughter straightened out her back, squared her shoulders, placed her hands on her hips, and nodded firmly. You call us the moment you land. I'm going to worry until you do, Catalina uttered in a loving voice as they hugged. I will. You have my word, Carson said. I noted how he was holding back his emotions just like my wife was. I have noticed ever since that day, the day Amber called me out of the blue. Catalina no longer called them her stepchildren but her son and daughter. I saw the pride in her eyes when she did. I pondered on with her help. We could reverse the damage their mother had inflicted on them since I wouldn't go along with being her damn cuck. I'll see you all in March. Carson called out once he was through the checkpoint. By son, I called back with a raised hand. After that, life was hectic with getting the condo packed up and coordinating with the movers, along with getting the house in Belmont neat and tidy with all the boxes. Also, with finding renters and subleasing our condo, which turned out to be one of her co-workers in the accounting department she works in. The man needed a place far from his wife, who he was divorcing. Get this, on the grounds of adultery. Small world, huh? And he needed a place large enough for his 2 kids and close to work so he wouldn't have to see his wife. So I was happy with working with him to come to an agreeable rent payment. Then there was the talk of if I wanted to do the yard work and the upkeep or hire someone to do it. Luckily, my wife solved that problem when she called Roberto, since he ran his own lawn care business, which he employs many of his nephews. We still pay him just at half price of what he normally charges. He's going to help Catalina pick out what kind of plants she wants planted in the front and back of the yard when it gets warmer. Alondra loved her new home, yet the first few weeks, she would crawl into our bed in the night. I can't blame her. Old house, strange noises in the night could spook any 5-year-old. Then the night came when she went to her own bed and stayed the entire night. And yes, Catalina and I did break in that tub quite often, and I loved every damn second of it. I know she did too. I talked to my kids once a day, if not more, depending on how busy they were with their own lives. I noted quite a few times Catalina walking around the house chatting away with one of them. The day after Carson left to head back to his base, I told Amber about the house. She was so ecstatic to know that she and David had their own room here should they ever visit again. However, all their traveling plans were on hold for the moment until after the honeymoon. I can't blame them. I know the wedding was taking a hit on their wallet, given how Catalina and I had stepped in a few times to pay for things when they were short. I know my parents helped out as much as they could. Nevertheless, I had a sickly feeling growing inside of me. I just couldn't place it at first yet as the days grew long and the date of Amber's wedding approached. I had a distinct feeling my 304 of an ex-wife was going to do something to ruin it. I know Catalina sensed my mood. I know it was irrational. Then again, this is my ex-wife we are talking about. Rationality wasn't something the witch was known for. Catalina assured me that even as poor of a wife the witch was, even she wouldn't do something to ruin Amber's wedding. I knew she meant well. Moreover, my wife never met her, never spent time with her, so she wouldn't know how vile that witch could be. As the day arrived for us to fly out a few days before the wedding, so we could attend the rehearsal dinner, I hid my fears under a mask of happiness as Alondra skipped towards the terminal, with her mother and Rosa tagging along, which I found strange. That was until I noted the very rosy cheeks Rosa sported when my gaze fell on her. I had wondered if what I saw at Christmas had gone any further than that day. It would seem it did. Hector wanted to come, but due to a blood clot problem, he was forbidden to fly, and he didn't want to drive the 14 hours it would take to get to Kansas City by car. So he opted to stay home and give his ticket to Rosa, who was very eager to go.
Rosa?
Yes, Nathan? I noted how her eyes glanced sideways at me as we continued to the terminal. Are you and my son dating? I asked in a fatherly voice.
Sí.
I hope you aren't upset, Rosa spoke. I could feel in her words that she was seeking my acceptance. Go easy on him. I doubt he's ever been in love with a Latino woman before, I said, casting her a friendly smile. Watching her and Catalina's mother chuckling at my reply, Catalina just lightly smacked my arm but was amused as well. I shall try. He's like his father, sweet, kind, and handsome, Rosa sighed, to which Catalina nodded along in agreement. But also a guy. We're idiots sometimes. This again got hoots of laughter out of the women. So you don't have a problem with us dating? Rosa asked shyly as we sat down, waiting for our flight to board. No, I don't. As long as the two of you are happy, that's all that matters in the end, I said, feeling my wife's hand slipping into mine. However, you hurt my boy. You'll have to deal with his mother, I stated, jutting my thumb towards Catalina, who wore that motherly smile oh so well. I understand, Rosa nodded firmly. So, how long have you two been dating? I asked, curious to know. What parent isn't? Since after New Year's. It's hard with him being away, and I knew what I was getting into when we started this. I'm just so eager for him to come home for good. What can I say? So was I. I know, we are as well, I nodded in agreement. You know he's going to Duke in the fall. And I think that's great, Rosa replied. Yet I got the feeling she was holding something back from me. So you two got any plans for when he comes home in the summer? Oh, I have plans, a great many plans. With that sultry look I saw in her eyes, I knew my son had better watch out. He might just get eaten. The moment we saw Carson standing there waiting for us, Rosa dropped her luggage and ran into my son's arms, which Catalina and her mother picked up. I had to clear my throat at how passionate that kiss was, as they seemed to be in a world of their own. Although, I was impressed that my son's Spanish had greatly improved since Christmas, as he greeted his step-grandmother, Catalina, and Alondra in it. Catalina only gave him some minor pointers when he got the pronunciation of a word wrong like a mother would. Otherwise, I could tell she was pleased with his progress. I looked to Rosa, who looked away innocently. "Hey, Dad." Carson greeted me with a warm hug. "How you doing, son?" "Can't complain. Better now?" I saw how he glanced at Rosa, who blushed like mad when my son pulled away. "I'm going to drop the three of you off at Grandma's, and you two will be staying with Amber and David. What about you?" Rosa asked. I watched how quickly she moved up to his side. "I am so not going to subject you to my mother. No one deserves that." This I couldn't agree more with. "I don't care, Carson. I want to spend time with you." The way she was looking at my son kind of reminded me of how Catalina did when we first started dating. You know, in that over-the-moon phase, I'm not saying she still doesn't get that look. Still, it was gradually faded out with that sultry, come-hither look of hers. "Rosa, you sure about that? You're walking into a minefield," I warned. "I can handle her, Nathan," Rosa said with the look I knew the witch wouldn't know what hit her if she pushed Rosa. "Don't say you weren't warned," I sighed. "Carson, if she gets to be too much, you call me. I'll straighten her out." "You sure, Dad? You know what Mom would do if she knew you were in town." I noted the worried look on his face when he glanced at Catalina. "I don't care what she will do. I'm not about to let her mess up your sister's wedding day," I said sternly. I saw from the corner of my left eye at how the three women stared at me in confusion. "Nat, she would?" "Sorry, Mom, but you don't know her. She would do it in a heartbeat if it meant getting to you," Carson said, looking right at me. "Okay, why? What's her fascination with me after all this time?" I asked, finally bridging that inquiry. "She still thinks she can wrangle you back and keep sleeping around like she's always done? She isn't getting my husband, ever," Catalina growled. I wondered if she finally realized what kind of person the witch truly is like. That's never going to happen. She should have learned that the moment I left her that day. Yet seems I must show her that I definitely traded up, I said, smiling at my wife as I wrapped my arm around her. Yes, you did. If you see her, you better tell me, Catalina said, peering up at me. Oh, you think I won't? Catalina, the only thing I feel about that woman is anger, not at what she did to us, but to our children. Nothing more, I said, reassuring her. Good, because I'm not giving you up ever. Glad to hear it, I said, watching her cheeks heat as I palmed her bum. Carson led us out of the airport hand in hand with Rosa, after taking back the bags she had dropped with Carson carrying the other in his free hand. Carson, isn't that? My voice trailed off at the sight of the minivan. Yeah, David's mom is letting me use it to shuttle you all around while you're here, Carson said from over his shoulder. Ah, that was nice of her, I stated. Yeah, she's a nice lady. I heard my son's agreement. Oh, no, Rosa, you can't sit back there. How else are you going to distract my son? I asked with a devious grin on my lips, hearing my son's dad and the giggling of my mother-in-law and wife from within the van. Nathan, Rosa gasped bashfully. I was so amused with myself as Rosa's face turned into a ripe tomato. Yet, she didn't hesitate to slide into the front passenger seat when I held the door open for her. Well, son, we're waiting? I uttered once I slid the door closed. Catalina softly chided me for teasing him so much. Although, I could see she was amused as well. We dropped Catalina's mother off at Amber's first also we could see her. Which, as you can guess, there were lots of smiles and tears between Amber and Catalina. David and I shared a manly handshake before turning it into our patented one-arm hug, thanking Catalina and I for the help in getting everything paid for their big day. Then I stood back as I watched my daughter teasing her brother, asking if Rosa was the one he just couldn't stop talking about. I have never seen my son's ears get so red before. I should have brought popcorn with me. Then, when the sibling banter was over, Amber greeted Rosa like a sister. David was his gentlemanly self, promising Catalina that they would take care of her mother while she was staying with them. Although Amber did voice the same concern as Carson and I did when she learned that Rosa would be staying with him at their mother's place. Nevertheless, Rosa reassured Amber that she could handle the witch. I don't know about that. We'll see how she survives the first night there. Carson and I spoke privately in the driveway of my parents' home, seeing him nodding along, getting his reassurances that he would call if something went down during the night. Waving goodbye to them. Still, I just couldn't shake that feeling in my stomach. I didn't learn until I woke up the next day that something did indeed happen. However, it wasn't who I thought would rock the boat. Whoever the witch was seeing at the moment, though it wise to sample Rosa's goods when Carson wasn't looking. From the way my son tells it, he rushed into what used to be my kitchen when the man was trying to forcibly kiss her, calling Rosa all kinds of names that I knew she wasn't any of them. I think the man was more of a lover than a fighter, as the saying goes, as Carson dropped him like a sack of potatoes. Now comes the very, very strange part, the witch's reaction to it all. It had me on edge, the moment my son told me as I stood out on my parents' brick porch. That 304 had to be up to something. I just know she was up to something. What that was, I couldn't say at the moment. Carson mirrored my thoughts. So, what are you going to do? I asked as my thumb and index finger pinched my lower lip as I tried to suss out the witch's motives. I would get a hotel room, but then I can't keep an eye on Mom if I did that. She's too overly nice to Rosa. It's damn creepy. Tell me about it. I sighed, rubbing my hand against the back of my head. Shit, she's coming. I'll call you later. Okay, son. I got out before the line went dead. Everything okay, Amor? How the sound of her voice always seems to lift my mood whenever I hear it. Is now, when my angel appears, I said sinfully, noting that bashful look as she brushed a strand of her hair behind her ear as she blushed, wondering if she remembered that night. I know I do. I relive it whenever I close my eyes. However, whatever my wife was about to say was interrupted by the shrill ring of my cell phone. Carson? Nathan, get out of there. Carson's mother learned you're here. I'm sorry, I let it slip. I didn't mean to. She overheard us, and Carson couldn't stop her. I noted Catalina's worried look on her face when I knew. She noted the instant change in my demeanor. Rosa, you have nothing to apologize for. It was bound to happen. You just let me deal with her. You and Carson go out for a nice breakfast, all right? I spoke, keeping my tone as calm as I could. Yet, my grip was tightening on my phone. You sure? I heard her indecision in her voice. Very. Tell Carson to take you to the spot I used to take him for breakfast when he was a boy. You two just enjoy the morning. Don't let this moment ruin your time together. I slid my phone into my pajama pocket, feeling that anger I felt 7 years ago resurfacing. Honey, what's wrong? Catalina asked in a concerned tone. La Desgraciada is coming. I growled as I marched into my parents' house. If I was going to speak with her, I would rather do it in pants. I never used that word around her when I referred to the witch, so I knew she was taken aback by it. Amor, you don't have to speak with her, Catalina pleaded with me. However, I knew she would just dog me the next 3 days if I didn't. I'd rather get this blight over with as soon as possible. It's now or they. Biting my tongue to keep my voice low and not to let Alondra hear me curse. We'll make a scene at Amber's wedding or the rehearsal. I'm not about to do that to Amber. I'd rather do this on my terms and not hers, I stated firmly as I tugged down my fresh, clean shirt as I surged from the bed. Okay, but why that shirt? Catalina asked, eyeing me suspiciously. I couldn't blame her. It did, after all, show off my now defined chest rather well. To show her what she threw away and what she will never have again because I already have the perfect wife. I answered with a coy smile. And I don't plan on ever losing her. Then you finish this today. I don't want to ever see that face ever again, Catalina said in a loving, tender voice as her hand caressed my left cheek. It never will with you around, I whispered as I lightly kissed the palm of her hand. I watched her eyes quivering as I did. Her lips offered no resistance when I leaned in to taste their velvety goodness. The tips of my fingers ran along her stomach as I eased around her. My footsteps carried my love for my wife. The tension in my muscles burned in the years of our lives together. My resolve to finally get the witch out of my life once and for all was the foundation of the faith my wife had in me to see this done alone, and I wasn't about to disappoint her. Blowing out a breath when I heard the tires squeal as she came to a halt in front of my parents' place as I walked out the front door. "Hi, baby," the witch greeted. I noted how her eyes ran down my chest as she mouthed, "Oh my. You do not call me that, understand? It's Nathan or Mr. Hal to you. I thought I established that when I left your bum." I growled as I marched towards her. "Nat, come on, that's in the past. Can't we just get past that and be a family again? I've learned my lesson. I promise no more men, I swear." "You can't even stop, can you?" "Wait, of course you can't," I sighed, shaking my head. "You're right. I was a witch, and I was stupid. But can't you see it in your—" Her voice died in her throat as I brought up my hand, showing off the platinum wedding band on my left ring finger. "As you can see, I have a family, and I'm not about to return to that hell you call the marriage, so you can go 304 around and have someone to support you while you do. You might have fooled me before, but those days are over. Nathan, please, let's just go somewhere and talk. I know I can refresh your memory of just how good we were together." I heard her vocally shudder as she touched my chest before I took hold of her wrist. "Get your damn hands off my husband." I heard Catalina shouting from behind me, smirking at the witch when she yanked her arm from my grip. "You should run along back to the house you like to spread your legs in before my wife steps off that porch," I spoke, feeling Catalina's support flooding into me. "And trust me, that is something I definitely like to see. This isn't over, Nat. I will get you back. You can count on it. And that witch can never give you what I can." I knew she did it on purpose when she pushed herself on me. It was always her main ploy to get what she wanted from me. Unlike then, she got no reaction from me, nor will she ever. That honor belongs to the woman behind me. See, unlike you, I don't cheat. So you go on living in that delusional world of yours. You couldn't keep to your vows, and now you have to deal with the aftermath. Now get the hell off my parents' property and don't ever come back," I growled low. "Oh, my poor Nat. What has that woman done to you?" It would seem she has indeed lost her bloody mind, seeing how I don't think she heard a damn word I spoke. "Don't you worry, baby. I haven't given up on us. I know you have to keep up appearance for her sake, but I know you still love me." Yep, she has definitely lost her mind if she thinks that. We do have 17 years together. I held up my hand to stop my wife when the witch ran her finger down my chest. Knowing Catalina, she was about to murder the witch, and I would rather not have to visit my wife in prison, seeing how there are no conjugal visits. I would die if that were to happen both physically and sexually. After all, we have 7 years to catch up on, and you do have this hard body for me to ravish. But I'll go. I wouldn't want to upset your parents. I'll be in touch, Nathan. We do have a daughter to see off on her wedded bliss. You never know. We might just have our second honeymoon as well. Yeah, I'd rather cut off my own tool before that even happens," I muttered as she tried to entice me with that swaying bum of hers. "You shouldn't say such things to your wife, Nathan. It's quite hurtful. But I'll forgive you this time. Bye, baby. I'll see you soon." My skin crawled when she blew me a kiss as she slid into her car. "Catalina?" I huffed as her hands tore at my shirt to rip it off my body, arching an eyebrow as she spat and cursed at my shirt as she stomped it into the ground. "Let go of me," Catalina growled as she tried to twist out of my grip. "You still love her." Her head shot back when I threw my head back and laughed loudly at the absurdity of the notion. "Then why did you?" "Because I know you. I know every inch of you." I lightly ran my fingertips down the left side of her face, resting the palm of my hand over her heart. "You would have killed her. I know it, and you know it." Seeing the truth in her eyes, I wasn't about to lose you. If me having to defile myself to keep you safe and acting foolish, I'd gladly do it again. You mean more to me than she ever did. Do you feel that? I asked, resting her right hand over my heart, letting her feel its frantic beat whenever she was near. Seeing her weakly nod, "You, only you, make my heart race like this." Then, she must have gone insane over the divorce because hell has to freeze over before I even think of ever getting back with that woman. Honestly, why would I? I already have the most perfect woman for me. No one can ever take your place. Not here, tapping my temple, or here, I said, resting my hand over hers that still sat over my heart. In all these years we've been together, have I ever given you a reason to doubt me? You promise she's out of your life, and there are no lingering feelings? Catalina asked, her eyes searching mine. No, the only thing I feel towards her is pity, I said truthfully. I'm sorry, Nat, I didn't. Sure, it's okay. You got upset because you love me. I love you too, I said, hugging my wife close, feeling her smiling against my chest. Get a room, you too, Amber teased from her open car window when she crawled to a stop. Dad, why are you standing bare-chested in Papa's yard? Your mother dropped by. I saw how Amber's face paled. And the police weren't called? Amber asked, looking at the two of us. No, this smart man stopped me from doing something foolish when she laid a hand on my husband. I rubbed her back when she held me tighter. As to why your father's displaying this body to the world, well, I wasn't about to let him wear anything she touched. I was so thankful the witch kept her hands above my belt. Otherwise, I would rather not miss my daughter's wedding for indecent exposure. And why aren't you raving mad? Amber asked, confused. Because how could I be? I have my wife in my arms. How could I be mad when your mother is not even a blip on my radar? I said. I wasn't trying to demean her mother in front of her. You really mean that? Catalina asked, peering up at me. Of course, I uttered, leaning down, my hand lightly caressing Catalina's right cheek. Our lips melded as they always have ever since I've had the very fortunate privilege of feeling their touch. You're stuck with me. There are no refunds. Wouldn't dream of it, Catalina whispered before sucking on her lower lip. Amber, can you please dispose of this in the garbage for me? She directed, holding out my shirt to my daughter. Wait just a second now, that's I'll buy you a new one, and the only one you should be showing these off to is me. I heard the hunger in her voice as she ran her hand down my chest. This hard body is only for me to drool over, Catalina said, gazing up into my eyes as she pressed her chest into me. True, although I would have thought you would want your eye candy, I said with a coy smirk. Only when we're alone, Catalina teased. Come, Amber, let's have breakfast before we girls jet off to the spa, she said, holding her arm out to my daughter once she closed the lid of the trash can. Nat, don't stay out here all morning. You're my sexy thing to look at. I simply shook my head with a smile as my wife and daughter walked into my parents' home. Dad? Carson's voice called out as I was doing some yard work for my father later that morning in the backyard. Hey, something wrong? I asked when I saw that look on my son's face, also noting how Rosa had tagged along. What did you and Mom get into? My son had this accusing, quizzical look on his face, which had me greatly perplexed, I might add. Other than she has this crazy idea she can win me back? Seeing Carson nod, I told her I don't cheat, and to stay the hell off my folks' property. Why? I asked, resting the head of the mattock on the ground while I leaned on the butt of the handle. Then you need to hear this, Carson said, handing me his phone after opening up his voicemail for me. Baby, your father and I are getting back together. Isn't that great? Oh my God, he looks so good. You should have seen him. So hot. I know you don't want to hear me talking about your father like that. I know these last 7 years have been trying on us, with your dad running off like he did. But he's home now, and we're going to be a family again. I know he thinks he loves this woman he's with, but really, we all know who he truly loves. Me. Instantly, my anger burned in my veins at the sound of that giggle of hers. I couldn't listen to any more without getting sick all over my shoes. I have no idea where the hell she got that from, but I assure you there will never be a chance that we get back together. Not in this century or the next. Your mother obviously has a screw loose, I said, handing my son his phone back. I just had to make sure. Can never be too sure with Mom. I just nodded when my son sighed and pocketed his phone. Don't let Catalina hear that message. I'd rather not have my wife in jail for murder, I said sternly. Already deleted it. Good. Now come, help your old man. Rosa might like watching you get all sweaty, I said, grinning madly as I lifted the mattock to my shoulder. I noticed how Rosa's eyes were giving Carson a once-over as she hummed. I tell you, I have never seen that boy pick up a tool faster than he did that day as we set out to plant a few bushes and clean out my mother's flower beds. By the time we were done, we both were sweaty and tired. Don't wear him out. I called after them as Rosa hurriedly dragged my son off towards his borrowed van, chuckling, remembering the days of my youth when I was just like the two of them. However, as I turned my gaze to the back door, standing in the open space was my wife, who had that same look in her eyes as Rosa did, walking hurriedly towards the door when my wife beckoned me with that finger of hers, knowing we had the house to ourselves for a while, and I was never going to pass up shower sex with her. I'm old. I'm not stupid. The rehearsal dinner went off without a hitch. How, you ask, given how my ex-wife clearly has gone off the deep end? Simple. She didn't bother to show, which I enjoyed greatly. Where she was, I didn't know or care to know. As long as she wasn't there to ruin anything, I say that's a win-win in my book. The next night, David and Amber were whisked off to have their parties of the last night of their single lives. I just hope the two of them don't do something they would regret in the morning. Amber stayed at my parents' house when her friends dropped her off after their bachelorette party, sleeping in my old bed while Alondra slept with her mother, and I, being the ever-so-thoughtful dad, got the couch. When the time came, Carson pulled up in the van with Rosa and my mother-in-law with him as we set out for the church they were having their wedding at. "You look beautiful, honey," I said while Catalina, her mother, and Rosa all fretted over her. Oddly, her bridesmaids were too busy with their noses in their phones to pay attention. "Thank you, Daddy," Amber said, trying not to tear up as she hugged me. "At least some people are paying attention," she bemoaned, shooting daggers at her friends, who quickly put away their phones. Then the calm before the storm broke as the witch's voice filled the air as the room Amber was given to use opened. "There's the handsome husband of mine. Please, Dad, don't." "Not today," Amber whispered, peering up at me when I knew she could feel how instantaneous my body tensed up at the sound of the 304's voice. "Relax, honey. I'm not about to do anything to ruin your day," I said, smiling down at her as I rested my hands on her shoulders. Nat, you don't call. You don't come to see me. You don't even text. I'm hurt." I noted how the bridesmaids instantly brought out their phones again. I also noted how Catalina's mother had a hand on my wife to keep that temper of hers in check. "Mama, who is that?" Alondra asked in that childlike innocence. "Well, hello?" Her words died in her throat the moment I spun around, causing her to take a few steps back. "Okay, I'll admit the witch still looked good, even if I would never screw her again. You do not speak to my daughter, do you understand? What part of I want nothing, I mean absolutely nothing, to do with you do you not comprehend? You were the cause of our marriage collapsing. You were the one that couldn't keep those legs closed. You were the one that had someone else in our bed on our anniversary and had the audacity to ask when I was coming home to take you out of for it. Has it never occurred to you why that was? Because the moment I saw that, I knew I meant nothing to you other than a live-in babysitter, nothing more. You can't even take responsibility for your own actions. You had to wrangle our children into your schemes. How far are you willing to sink?" "Oh, I know for certain how far you're willing to sink, too. Amber told me all about it. Be very, very glad we're in a church right now." I saw the genuine fear in the witch's eyes as I marched up to her. For I am certain if we weren't, then that witch would be lying dead at my feet. Otherwise, I'd strangle that scrawny neck of yours for trying to get our daughter to sleep with one of your callers for the night. So either shut up and stand over there and don't say a word or leave this room. I have to be thankful that she didn't say that above a whisper. One, for my daughter's sake, and two, Catalina would have gone ballistic. "Don't worry, baby. I know it's all a ploy. I'll play along." "Mom, come on. There are some people that want to talk to you," Carson said, strolling into the room and taking the witch by the hand. "Of course, baby. I do have to set a good example for my daughter. Have you seen your father? Doesn't he just look so handsome?" I nodded to my son when he mouthed, "I'm sorry," to me as he led her out of the room. "Sorry, honey, I didn't. That was awesome." Amber giggled. "I think you need to get your mother some help. It doesn't appear she hears a word I say." I sighed, rubbing the back of my head. "Mom's been like that since you left, and I know she has been forced to see someone. She kind of went crazy for a while. Mom, spinning on the ball of her foot, help make me look pretty like you for my husband. Amber, you're already beautiful, Catalina said in a motherly tone, but I'll help to bring it out even more, so that wonderful man of yours will know whom he belongs to, she spoke. Yet her eyes were always on me. I had the feeling it was meant for both of us. Of course, I knew who I belonged to. There was never a doubt in my mind. I thought I'd never do this. I mean, walking Amber down the aisle like I was doing at that moment. How I'm so very, very happy that she called me that day out of the blue. Otherwise, I might have still been stubborn and missed this day altogether. I love you, honey, I whispered to her before I gave her away to David, who nodded to me when I placed a hand on his left arm. My mother placed a hand on my arm when I sank down between her and Catalina, who was dabbing her eyes as Amber and David ascended the few steps together to stand before the priest. Alondra was nestled in between David's parents. What can I say? She's taken a liking to them, as I know they have with her. I could feel the witch's eyes on me the entire time. However, I never once made eye contact with her. I was very glad Carson kept her at the other end of the pew. I knew that mustn't have been easy for him. The reception after the wedding was very sweet. It hurt to see my daughter all grown up and ready to start her own family. Nevertheless, that is life. Nothing stays the same forever. Although the real entertainment for me was watching the witch running out of the hall, David and Amber had rented crying like mad. When we all heard clearly when Carson shouted in anger, "Why do you think I joined the army? To get away from you. You're nothing but a lying, cheating woman, and everything that a-hole did to you is way less than what you deserve for what you did and made us do to Dad." I would say I felt sorry for her, but then again, she did bring this on herself. After the reception, we saw Amber and David off to start their honeymoon. Catalina and I, along with David's parents, bought them a very nice honeymoon as their wedding present. The next day, after saying goodbye to my parents and my son, the five of us flew back to Charlotte, where we, too, have to get on with our lives. I only found out about what happened to the witch only in passing when Amber made some offhand comment about having to go pick her mother up from the hospital. It seems that after our departure, the witch nearly drank herself to death and was placed in a psych ward for observation. Not that I cared, but she is their mother, so I have to deal with her for the foreseeable future. After all, I do have a son to marry off, who, by the way, showed up at my doorstep arm in arm with Rosa on May 31st. I was a grinning old man right then as I hugged my son tightly. It would also seem I was to be a grandfather and father almost the exact same time. It seems this old man still has the juice to knock my wife up, and apparently, Amber miscounted her days, and well, you know how those things go. It's amusing sometimes to watch my 3-month pregnant wife chatting away about baby items and whatnot with my equally 3-month pregnant daughter. Seems Spain is just going to have to wait a while. And so, Rosa became a permanent figure in our family. Carson is doing well in school, to which I'm sure Rosa is a great help with. But I'll let your mind wander on how much. I know Alondra's never been so happy before with a whole house full of people she can endlessly talk to. I have to say life is good. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.